Tonight, the severe flooding in the southern tier has left many families devastated, and now it is threatening the financial stability of school districts as well. Many districts incurred added expenses from storm damage, including temporary housing for students or higher costs to bus them into school. And on top of that, many residents aren't able to pay their property tax bill on time because they have used their savings to do repairs on their damaged homes. My next guest has proposed a series of bills to give districts some help, and it's Binghamton Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo. Assemblywoman, thanks for your time tonight.
Good to be here with you.
So you're carrying 4 bills here that would do a variety of things. If you could just quickly run through what exactly these measures will do and why they're needed now.
Sure. 2 things we did back in 2006. The one would be a Flood Reassessment Act. It would allow municipalities who wish to opt in to reassess properties, not wait until March when it's generally done, but reassess properties based on the value of those homes and businesses as of September the 12th, especially in cases where homes or businesses received more than 50% of the damage. So basically it's a reassessment, a repeat of something from '06. Another bill would, the state would come in and assume the 12.5% of local costs. As you know, FEMA pays 75% of the cost for damages, but the rest is shared by the state and by the municipalities, and this would allow the state to come in and assume those costs. And I understand that's going to be a little bit difficult right now given the shape we're in economically, but even if we can come in and take a portion of that and provide some assistance, that would be helpful. The next 2 bills have to do with our school districts. One would give schools some flexibility so they could take installment payments from people who have school taxes due. I would also give them the authority to give refunds to people who opted to pay those installments so they could get some cash back and then pay it back more slowly. And the last piece of legislation would allow school districts to exempt the costs of responding to this natural disaster from the 2% property tax cap. That was always in state law, part of a contingency budget, but in the crafting of the 2% cap bill, that piece was taken out. And now we find that schools are very, very challenged to try to stay within the property tax cap, which is very important, obviously, but the natural disaster expenses are just stretching them a little bit too far.
Okay, I want to return to that tax cap bill in particular, but
Sure.
First, just one quick question. You have a Republican sponsor in the Senate for 3 of these bills?
Yes, in fact, Senator Bonasek, who represents Delaware, Sullivan, and parts of Ulster County, put those bills in during Hurricane Irene and then approached me because he knew that I sponsored some of the same bills during the '06 floods. So he has the bulk of those bills. The last bill that I referenced on the property tax cap exemption does not yet have a Senate sponsor. We're just now in the process of reaching out to our local senators to see if one of them may be interested in helping out with that. Okay,
and how would a district qualify for this? Would they have to be in a county that was designated disaster area?
Well, certainly they'd have to be in a county, as you mentioned, designated a disaster area, but it would basically go to the Commissioner of Education, and he or she would have to decide whether or not their damages and circumstances would rise to that level. So it wouldn't be something they would just self-apply. They would have to get approval from state education. And certainly in the case of the Owego-Appalachian School District or in my own assembly district, the city of Binghamton, which I think has now incurred over $1 million in expenses, not only for overtime and cleanup expenses, but they have to rent schools. Fortunately, there were a couple of empty Catholic schools, but they're having to pay rental expenses, things they really did not anticipate. As you know, that 2% was going to be tough just with rising health care costs, utility costs, and other fixed expenses.
Right.
So we're hoping for a Senate sponsor on that bill.
Now, just to play devil's advocate for a second on the 2% property tax cap bill, one thing that I would imagine somebody would say would be, there's already exemption language provided for in the tax cap bill, and that's 60% of voters in a school district can override the cap, and it's actually 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. if 60% of voters feel like the school district cannot live within that cap, given the financial troubles that a lot of these districts are facing because of flooding, is that bill necessary?
Well, that's certainly going to be an option if we can't get this bill passed, if 60% of the voters choose to. There is a concern, however, with that risk that schools do take, that if they go out and it fails, they will wind up with a 0% increase. They won't even be able to get the 2%. So it's a bit of a risk in general, but certainly with schools that are so vulnerable right now, we thought we'd give them a break on the front end of that decision.
I see. So you referenced the floods from 5 years ago. Obviously, 5 years ago, we had a very different situation, mainly because the economy wasn't as in such dire straits as it is now. How does the floods back then compare to the flooding of now, and how is the recovery effort going?
To be perfectly honest with you, there's no comparison. It is far worse this time. I mean, right now we have 8,500 people who applied for FEMA assistance. I can't give you the exact number from last time, but it is really, really substantially larger. The sheer number of large businesses that have been impacted is also much different from last time. We also now have an emergency in terms of nursing home beds and hospital beds. All of our Section 8 housing in downtown was disrupted, so we have a major housing crisis in terms of finding places for people to live. I think some 5,000 people remain displaced. But when you have 2 nursing homes, for example, that come offline, those nursing home beds that were available in other places have all been filled up. And now the hospitals are backing up because they have no place to release people. That's also very, very different from last time, where we didn't have that level of disruption to our healthcare system. And furthermore, we didn't have the amount of damage to our schools as well. I mean, the City of Binghamton and others had damage, but it's not even clear at the moment whether some of these schools will be able to be rebuilt, repaired. They may have to be demolished and rebuilt altogether. So it's very, very stressful time.
There was some other legislation that was introduced. I think it's some Republican legislation, actually, that would exempt flood victims from the sales tax for purchasing certain items to basically put their lives back together. Is that some legislation that you would like to see taken up as well?
Definitely. We've heard from people who are trying to get some of these large housing complexes back online, and the electrical equipment alone, we've talked to one vendor, $9,000 just for the sales tax on some of the equipment that they're purchasing. That's one story among hundreds that we've heard. So I would definitely support that. I know that some limited disco has discussed it, and I would assume that if we can get back in session, whether now or back in January, that will be part of a package of bills we'll have to consider. I hope we can get back sooner than later.
Well,
to be perfectly honest,
to that point,
very urgent.
To that point, should the legislature get back before the end of the year to take this up, or is there a sense that this can kind of wait until January?
I would certainly hope so. The sheer number of people who are affected by this flood, not only in the southern tier but throughout the rest of the state, even on Long Island and parts of New York City, throughout the state, through these 2 storm events, I think merits serious consideration. I know it's expensive to bring the legislature back, and that will have to be factored in. And in conversations with the Speaker and the leadership, we'll have to make those determinations. They know how I feel about it, and if we think we can get it done early on in January, then I'll be okay with that too, so long as I know we'll be addressing this as a top priority. It really is quite dire and in need of urgent attention.
Have you received any response from the governor's office on this legislation?
No, we just we just started discussing it publicly yesterday, and I have not heard from them yet, but I'm certain that we'll be having a variety of conversations moving forward. They understand and have been very, very helpful to our community and across the state. One of the things I'd like to commend the governor on is having the state agencies move as quickly as they have to try to relax some of the restrictions and the bureaucratic snafus that often come up when we try to accomplish things. And they've really moved mountains in many respects for us, and I know how sympathetic they are. I look forward to speaking with them in detail.
Okay, Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo, unfortunately we're out of time. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Nick.